British museums are very, very British because it's very, very, very British to take from Indigenous people and never hand it back.
They sit behind glass, quiet, immaculate, forgotten. But these treasures weren't gifted to Europe. They were taken through war, fire, and humiliation. Scrolls that once lined imperial libraries. Statues carved with sacred meaning. Now they're museum decorations. A jade bowl in London. A bronze head in Paris. The West calls it preservation. China calls it theft. And now, China wants them back. This isn't just about artifacts. It's about memory, power, and payback. Because in the 1800s, Europe stole more than treasure. It stole a civilization's soul. And that wound, it's still open. This is the untold story of the Great Museum Heist, and why the fight over China's stolen art is far from over. Stay with us till the end, and consider subscribing so you never miss the deep dives that history's mainstream leaves out. Let's rewind to the 19th century. China was one of the richest and most culturally advanced civilizations on Earth. But Western powers, armed with cannons, greed, and opium, wanted more. During the Second Opium War, British and French forces marched on Beijing. Their goal wasn't just military victory, it was domination. And they found the perfect symbol to destroy: Yuanmingyuan, the old summer palace. It wasn't just a palace. It was a spiritual and cultural jewel. Over 150 years in the making. Home to rare books, astronomical instruments, priceless art, and centuries of royal memory. What happened next was not war. It was vandalism on an imperial scale. Soldiers looted everything they could carry: jade, silk, ivory, bronze, even religious relics. Priceless scrolls were used to wrap loot. Imperial robes were cut into souvenirs. Then, to erase any trace of dignity, they set it all on fire. Lord Elgin, son of the man who took the Parthenon marbles, ordered it personally. 3 days of flames turned centuries of Chinese heritage into ash. But this was just the beginning. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, China suffered wave after wave of plunder, from the Opium Wars to the Boxer Rebellion to the fall of the Qing. Western powers, missionaries, and private collectors all joined the rush. It was open season on Chinese civilization. Thousands of temples, libraries, and tombs were raided. And by the 1900s, Europe's museums were full of Chinese treasures, objects never meant to leave the Middle Kingdom. These weren't trophies of victory. They were symbols of submission. Today, if you want to see the lost soul of Imperial China, don't go to Beijing. Go to London, Paris, or Berlin. Start with the British Museum. Inside is a jade burial suit made from over 2,000 pieces, stitched with gold wire, once reserved for royalty. Walk through the Louvre, and you'll find bronze vessels from the Shang Dynasty, used in ancient rituals. At the Victoria and Albert Museum, entire rooms are filled with Qing Dynasty furniture, lacquerware, and religious relics. Estimates suggest over 1.6 million Chinese artifacts are held overseas. And here's the uncomfortable truth: most were never legally acquired. Western museums often argue these artifacts were purchased or gifted, but they leave out the part where those deals happened under colonial occupation or immediately after violent conflict. Many items were looted directly by soldiers and later entered museum collections through auctions or donations. Others were rescued from collapsing dynasties. A moral justification wrapped around a very profitable theft. Some institutions still refuse to list where artifacts came from. No context, no history, just cold glass and quiet plaques. To many Chinese visitors, it feels like visiting a graveyard. But the dead aren't the only ones watching. China today is not the broken empire of the 19th century. It's a rising superpower, and it wants its memory back. In the early 2000s, China launched a quiet but powerful campaign: Recover Stolen Cultural Property. The Chinese government began funding museums, historians, and even billionaires to track and reclaim looted artifacts. In 2009, two bronze fountainheads, once part of a Zodiac water clock at the Summer Palace, surfaced at a Christie's auction in Paris. Outrage exploded across Chinese media. Protesters gathered outside. The sale went forward, but a French billionaire, François-Henri Pinault, bought them and returned them to China. That moment was a signal. The game had changed. Now, China uses every tool available: diplomacy, economics, and soft power. In 2018, Italy returned 796 artifacts after a cultural agreement. French President Emmanuel Macron acknowledged that keeping African and Asian artifacts without consent was a mistake. Auction houses regularly face pressure to pull Chinese items, and wealthy Chinese collectors are buying items at auction, not to keep, but to repatriate. At the center of it all is the National Cultural Heritage Administration, which actively monitors global sales, flags looted goods, and negotiates returns. China isn't asking anymore. It's demanding, and the world is starting to listen. For decades, Western museums clung to a set of justifications. We preserve global heritage. The artifacts are safer here. Returning them would open the floodgates. But the cracks are showing. First, the preservation argument. Yes, some Chinese heritage was destroyed during wars or the Cultural Revolution. But today, China has some of the world's most advanced conservation labs and museums. The idea that Western countries are better caretakers is outdated and insulting. Second, the floodgate fear. It's real. If Britain returns China's relics, what about Nigeria's Benin bronzes? Egypt's mummies? India's stolen gods? But that's not an argument against justice. It's an argument against delay. Third, the legal loopholes. Many museums claim legal title, but legality under colonial law is not the same as moral right. If stealing under duress was legal then, does that make it right now? And here's the glaring hypocrisy. When Nazis looted Jewish art during World War II, Western powers demanded it be returned. Why is colonial looting treated differently? The truth is this: the West didn't just steal objects. It stole meaning, memory, and pride. And slowly, even Western voices are starting to admit that keeping these treasures isn't just unethical, it's indefensible.
Many of those items were stolen, so I know what you're thinking, they should probably just give them back. Unfortunately, they can't just give things back, and that is because of a law called the British Museum Act of 1963. The Act essentially prevents the museum from disposing of any of its items unless it is a duplicate or they have no use for it anymore due to damage.
Today, China is using more than money and muscle to reclaim its past. It's using culture as strategy. In state media, films, and documentaries, the story of stolen artifacts is told again and again. The looting of Yuan Mingyuan is taught in every Chinese classroom. Museums like the Poly Art Museum and the Capital Museum now host exhibitions on cultural theft, not just to mourn, but to inspire. China frames the return of its treasures not as nostalgia, but as justice, a reclaiming of dignity, a reversal of the colonial gaze, and it's influencing how the world sees itself. In Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, countries are banding together, sharing intelligence, even coordinating demands for restitution. The global South is no longer asking to be included, it's asking to be heard. Meanwhile, Western institutions find themselves caught in a moral quicksand. Return the artifacts and risk shrinking collections. Keep them and face growing outrage, both abroad and at home. Because younger generations, even in the West, aren't proud of empire. They want transparency, truth, and real accountability. Culture is no longer just soft power. It's hard leverage, and China knows how to use it. The fight over China's looted art isn't just about the past, it's about who gets to shape the future. Will Western museums continue to guard artifacts taken during war, or will they recognize that the world has changed? As China rises, this question will only grow louder. On social media, viral videos call out museums for displaying stolen art. TikTokers walk through the British Museum whispering, "That was looted, that too, and that." Millions of views, millions of minds changed. This new generation isn't satisfied with plaques and apologies. They want action, and museums are beginning to feel it. Some are offering long-term loans back to China. Others are quietly negotiating behind closed doors. But for many Chinese people, nothing short of full repatriation will do. Because when you steal a nation's treasures, you don't just take objects, you take identity. And identity, once stolen, demands to be reclaimed. So what happens next? Maybe the Jade Bowl returns to Beijing. Maybe the bronze head finds its way home. Maybe, just maybe, the world learns that true power is not in taking, but in giving back. This isn't just China's story. It's a global one. From Nigeria to India, from Egypt to Peru, the scars of looting run deep. But now, the world is waking up. And those artifacts behind glass? They aren't just objects. They're witnesses. To theft, to trauma, to survival. The question isn't whether they'll be returned. It's when. Because the world is watching. And history never forgets. If you believe stolen history deserves justice, make your voice part of the movement. Share this story. Tag a museum. Start the conversation. Because healing begins when we stop pretending the past doesn't matter.